I had a dream the other night that, well, I didn't understand. A figure walked in through the mist with a flintlock in his hand. His clothes were torn and dirty as he stood there by my bed. He took off his three-cornered hat, and speaking low to me, he said, "We fought a revolution to secure our liberty. We wrote the Constitution as a shield from tyranny. For future generations, this is the legacy we gave. In this, the land of the free and home of the brave. The freedoms we secured for you, we hoped you'd always keep. But tyrants labored endlessly while your parents were asleep. Your freedom's gone, your courage lost. You're no more than a slave. In this, the land of the free and home of the brave. You buy permits to travel and permits to own a gun. Permits to start a business or to build a place for one. On land that you believe you own, you pay a yearly rent, although you have no voice in saying how the money's spent. Your children must attend a school that doesn't educate, and your Christian values can't be taught according to the state. You read about the current news in a regulated press, and you pay a tax you do not owe to please the IRS. Your money is no longer made of silver nor of gold. You trade your wealth for paper so your life can be controlled. You pay for crimes that make our nation turn from God and shame. You've taken Satan's number, traded in your name. You've given government control to those who do you harm so they could burn down churches and seize the family farm and keep our country deep in debt. Put men of God in jail. Harass your fellow countrymen while corrupted courts prevail. Your public servants don't uphold the solemn oaths they've sworn. And your daughters visit doctors so their children may be born. Your leaders send artillery and guns to foreign shores and send your sons to slaughter fighting other people's wars. Can you regain the freedoms for which we fought and died? Or don't you have the courage or the faith to stand with pride? And are there no more values for which you'll fight to save? Or do you wish your children to live in fear and be a slave? Oh, sons of the Republic, arise, take a stand, defend the Constitution, the supreme law of the land. Preserve our great republic and each God-given right. And pray to God to keep the torch of freedom burning bright. As I awoke, he vanished in the mist from whence he came. His words were true. We are not free, but we have ourselves to blame. For even now as tyrants trample each God-given right, we only watch and tremble, too afraid to stand and fight. If he stood by your bedside in a dream while you were asleep and wondered what remains of the freedoms he'd fought to keep, what would be your answer if he called out from the grave? Is this still the land of the free and home of the brave? God.
Brainwashed, camouflage, crazy Christian patriot, paranoid, citizen voice,
So I say this to the militias and all others who believe that the greatest threat to freedom comes from the government. If you appropriate our sacred symbols for paranoid purposes and compare yourselves to colonial militias who fought for the democracy you now rail against, you are wrong. How dare you call yourselves patriots and heroes? If you say the government is in a conspiracy to take your freedom away, you are just plain wrong. There is no freedom.
Now we can see a new world coming into view. A world in which there is a very real prospect of a new world order. The new world order does not mean surrendering our national sovereignty or forfeiting our interests.
That America's central bank operates in the public interest. The truth is that the Federal Reserve is a private bank owned by private stockholders and run purely for their private profit. Any doubt whether the Federal Reserve is a part of the U.S. government, check your local telephone book. In In most cities, it is not listed in the blue government pages. It is listed in the business white pages, right next to Federal Express, another private company. But more directly, U.S. courts have ruled time and time again that the Fed is a private corporation.
Today, we're all going to learn a new term. It's only 2 words. Now listen closely. Can all of you say constructive fraud? Constructive fraud!
Did you ever get the feeling as you're staring at the ceiling that this game of life is playing fair? And as fast as we can make it, there's a hand that grabs it till they find us in a grave somewhere. Like a rodent on a treadmill, we keep pushing for it uphill, but we never seem to get too far. Well, if you think you're being taken, then you're ready to awaken to the truth of what we really are. We're all indentured, servitude, slaves, overburdened and bewildered feudal maids, who have lost our sole posterity through ignorance and apathy, and now we're being cast out of our graves. And as long as we stay passive, we'll succumb, contented with some socialistic crumb. We're the naked truth and fact is, we're all saps who pay our taxes, and that is why the banksters keep us dumb. The state of our condition be the product of omission, what we didn't learn in public school. And did our fathers all for history, all fight and die for liberty, so we could play the tyrant fool? And can you call it education when it's all indoctrination to obey the hidden powers that be? Did we fight the revolution? Did we win the world war just to slumber into slavery? We're all indentured, servitude, slaves, overburdened and bewildered feudal maids, who have lost our sole posterity through ignorance and apathy, and now we're being cast out of our graves. And as long as we stay passive, we'll succumb, contented with some humanistic crumb. The naked truth and fact is, we're all saps who pay those taxes, and that is why the banksters keep us dumb. While Franklin and Eleanor were telling us they hated war, they made a deal behind our back. They said the bankers could enslave us for a portion of our wages, and today we call it income tax. But what they failed to tell us was the way they planned to sell us into statutory slavery. Now it's called constructive fraud. Some even claim the wrath of God. I call it social insecurity. Let's stop being indentured, servitude, slaves, overburdened and bewildered feudal maids, and claim our lost posterity. Rise up and proclaim liberty. It's high time we rock the boat and make some way. 'Cause as long as we stay passive, we'll succumb. They'll carve us on their communistic crumb. The naked truth and fact is, we don't have to pay those taxes. If it's time we show those banksters, those international gangsters, so let's turn the tables and spoil all their fun.
Hello, Austin, Texas, and we are back. Now this is going to be kind of a light show here tonight, almost on the eve of Thanksgiving, a day that I myself even celebrate.
And I want to just mention first off, before we get to some of the tidbits here, we've got first off about 10 minutes of footage of the burial of a young fellow named Ezekiel Hernandez, who was shot and killed by U.S. Marines down on the Texas border. That's about 10 minutes of that. We've got that later on in the program. We've got a 5-minute piece about long distance and how, well, I haven't actually seen it, so we're going to be playing it. But it's suggesting that long distance companies are stealing us blind, our telephone service. And then we've got a couple other little things. I want to just mention first off, folks, this is Monday, live October 24th, or November 24th. And we're going to be taking calls tonight, so if you want to give us a call, the number here is 477-2288. That's 477-2288. And you can give us a call, anything on your mind, because it's going to be kind of a light, free-flowing show here tonight. So anybody who's got any tidbits of information that they might have to share with the viewers of this program, they can give us a call, and we'll go ahead and bring your calls up to the air. A couple of quick things I want to mention. First off, we've been doing quite a bit of outreach with this program over the last couple, 3 months. And this, my friends, is the result. This is, my producer went to the mailbox today, and this was what was in the mailbox today.
Still got a bunch more.
Yeah, I know, I understand. I'm going to explain that, please. Okay, now this was in the mailbox today, if you can see it all. And we also received a notification stating that the article is too large for your box.
We got more.
Do you know what? I bet those phones are broke again.
No, they're not.
I bet they are, because they were Saturday night.
No, this is unplugged.
Yeah, well, okay.
No, you got calls.
Okay. The phone was broken here Saturday, so I'm just...
Not now.
Okay.
Start calling.
Okay, you can call 477-ACTV. We're gonna put you on the air tonight. We normally we don't take a lot of calls, but we are tonight. So for one more time, this is just partial of the mail that this program has received. This was actually in today's our P.O. box here. So as you can see, folks, the expansion of this program here, there's probably about 30 pieces here. And we also received this mail pickup notice that the articles was too large for your box and too numerous in number. So, yes, I think you have a bunch of them too, right, Linda? So you have a bunch of mail.
Yeah.
And we still have more to pick up.
Well, we can use more.
So obviously, yeah. So I appreciate, now some of it was here locally, and I appreciate that. I did notice as I was glancing through this first bit here that at least 5 or 6 was here locally in Austin. However, I think most of it was due to the fact of a couple of international shortwave shows that I was recently on. But this is the first batch of letters here today. So there's about 30 pieces here, and I appreciate that. I haven't had a chance to read all this stuff yet, but I was just glancing at it as we came to the air. So I appreciate that. Now, one thing I want to mention here, one thing that I did notice was that this was actually sent to me from sent to this program. Here's something from Ohio, Austin, Illinois, Axtell, Texas. Some of this stuff. Here's Toledo, Ohio. Saline, Michigan. I think this is the fellow. Yeah, this is the fellow that John Lupine of Saline, Michigan, sent me this. Now let me just read bits and pieces. Can we get a close-up of this? Now this is kind of the stuff that we're that we like to show on this program because, most of the major media will not. So this is the kind of stuff that we received in our mail here. Dozen good reasons to get us out of the United Nations. I'm going to go ahead and read just a few of these because I glanced over them myself. The first one is the UN's basic philosophy is both anti-American and pro-totalitarian. Number two, the UN was founded by communist and CFR members whose common goal was a socialist world government. Number three, the UN has always chosen socialist one-worlders for leaders. The Secretary General at the UN founding conference was Soviet spy Alger Hiss. He was followed as Secretary General by Norwegian socialist Tagar Lee, Swedish socialist Dag Hammarskjöld, Burmese Marxist U Thant, Austrian former Nazi Kurt Waldheim, goes on, Egyptian socialist Boutros Ghali. Each has consistently used the full resources of the United Nations to promote communist and socialist causes around the world. And it just goes on and on here about that. Number four, the UN seeks power to control the environment, population, children, and the world. Both the 1972 UN Environmental Program and the 1992 UN Conference on Environment and Development laid plans to whip up widespread environmental concerns, some exaggerated, many completely fabricated. These concerns would then be used as justification for increasing UN authority on environmental issues. And all, of course, under the banner of protecting the environment. In late 1994, United Nations planners held a meeting in Egypt approving a 20-year, $17 billion plan to stabilize the world's population. Let's see. Number five, the UN Charter outlines a path to world tyranny. After giving lip service about not intervening in matters which are essentially within the domestic jurisdiction of any nation, the UN Charter continues, but this principle shall not prejudice the application of enforcement measures under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. Chapter 7 discusses sanctions and boycotts, but if these are decided to be inadequate, it may take such action by air, sea, or land forces as may be necessary to maintain or restore international peace and security. Here's this peace thing again. They're always giving us the peace business. Number six, the UN is building its own army to enforce its will. Now, some of this stuff, folks, I don't necessarily, I know that the UN is involved in a lot of these things, but I don't know that they themselves could handle a complete takeover of, let's say, the United States. So they may implement some Chinese troops or something like this to, to fulfill that need for that. But there's no doubt that the United Nations is definitely an arm of the international conspiracy. The UN doesn't settle disputes, it makes them worse. We've talked about this on this show. Our ambassador to the UN in 1982, although a UN supporter, admitted the UN has become an arena in which countries are drawn into problems they might never have become involved in the first place. And I know that American troops serving as global cops for the UN became targets for criminals and terrorists. In 1983, 241 U.S. Marines were blown to bits at the Beirut airport. 5 years later, a U.S. Marine lieutenant colonel was kidnapped and eventually murdered by Arab terrorists while in a UN unit in Lebanon. And of course, this is it's much bigger than this. The fact that the UN resolutions have got American troops involved in wars, the Korean conflict, and the Vietnam War, and etc. So this is a real neighborly organization. Number 8, the UN ignores communist atrocities, but targets non-communist nations and leaders. This is exactly the fact that says here, when Soviet tanks rolled into Hungary in the late 1950s, when the Chinese communists were murdering Tibetans in the 1960s, when the Soviets were butchering civilians in Afghanistan in the 1970s and 1980s, And when Chechnya was brutalized by Russians in the 1990s, the United Nations did nothing. But the UN declared tiny Rhodesia a threat to international peace in the 1960s, enabling pro-communist terrorist Robert Mugabe to seize power. And it was a UN-led campaign that brought self-described communist and convicted terrorist Nelson Mandela to power in South Africa in the 1990s. Also, they have been responsible through UN and economic sanctions of starving literally hundreds of thousands of people across the planet, in Iraq, in Cuba, etc. South Central America, right. It goes on, this loving organization. The UN, number 9, the UN embraces Communist China, history's most murderous criminal regime. I also got to ask, where was the UN when 90-some people were murdered in Waco, Texas? Or Ruby Ridge, Idaho, when a couple people were murdered? So it just basically depends upon if it fits the bill of so-called human rights violations that they seem fit, then they apparently supposedly jump in. But if it's something that's endorsed by the general standard line of thinking, then I guess it's acceptable. Number 10, the UN is a moral cesspool filled with perverts and fat cats. In 1993, the UN Economic and Social Council granted consultant status to the International Gay and Lesbian Association, which includes the North American Man-Boy Love Association, advocates of child molestation, and the Dutch group, I can't even pronounce that, which promotes the use of children as sex objects. I, for one, am not too big of a... I don't consider homosexuality to be the biggest problem in the world, but in fact, I would suggest to you, if you're watching this, that the UN is not your friend, even if it says it is. You're just being exploited for other reasons. Okay, number 11, America supplies the money. The UN then finances tyrants and assorted enemies of the U.S. and conditions, and the nations aided grow worse. U.S. taxpayers pay 25% of the UN budget plus 31% of the UN special agency budgets. Additional billions of dollars go to the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and other UN-related lending agencies, where they have been used for incredibly wasteful and subversive UN projects. Let's see. World Bank aid funds went to brutal Marxist dictator Mengistu while he was causing large-scale starvation and death in Ethiopia, to Tanzanian dictator Julius Nyerere as he drove peasants off their land and burned their huts, and to the Vietnamese communists sending thousands of boat people into the sea. This is, and number 12, the UN is a war organization, not a peace organization. Article 42 of the UN Charter claims authority to take such action by air, sea, or land forces as may be necessary to maintain or restore international peace and security. But the UN definition of peace is never given. Tyrannical regimes throughout history have defined peace as the absence of all opposition. To achieve peace, in Cantaga in 1961, UN planes bombed hospitals, schools, administrative buildings, and private homes. Cantaga was an anti-communist province of the Belgian Congo, seeking freedom from the communist-controlled central government. The UN is now and has never been a peace organization. It will use whatever military power it is given to force all nations of the world to submit. So this was the one of the things that I happened to get mailed, and I thought it was quite interesting. And like I said, folks, this is the mail that we've got just today, and I certainly appreciate it. Like I say, about maybe 5 or 6 pieces here were locally, and the rest were across America. I have not seen any out of America yet, but hopefully that. We also received this nice this nice pocket calendar, and I will put that to good use. So I appreciate the mail. That's the bottom line. We down here at the Jeff Davis Show are open to any cause or effort as long as it exposes corruption or violations or treason or whatever. That's what this show is all about. Now, right there, if you want to drop us a line, there's the address. Okay. Now, before we move on here, I want to say, I promised to do this. I want to say hello to Foley Mendoza from Michael Owen. Hello, Foley Mendoza. I was asked to do that, and I'm doing it. Hello, Foley. I'm glad you're watching, Foley. I also want to mention that, let's see, tomorrow at Tuesday, to be the 25th of October, on Channel 6, it's the there's a kind of one of those citizens news conferences to return government back to the people, and it will be tomorrow on Channel 6 at 11 o'clock, and then also tomorrow at 4 p.m. on Channel 10, Teledemocracy will be on. That's so tomorrow the news conference, and then 4 o'clock on Channel 10, Teledemocracy, with, I guess, a new special edition. So we've got that going on. Also tomorrow night at 8:30 to 11, my friend Alex Jones will be on with The Real Spin. That's 8:30 tomorrow night. And so these are just a few things to... Now also we've got coming up here Sunday, we've got the monthly downsized government seminars, and this is about the 6th week of that. That's coming up this Sunday at the Chariot Inn on 7300 North IH 35, and open to the public. And on February 22nd, which is about 3 months away from now, we've got one that's they're all doing a good job, but the one that's particularly close to my heart is we have several branch Davidians, surviving Davidians, coming down on Sunday, February the 22nd, for the to be worked in conjunction with the seminars, and so that should be going well. A couple other things, we're working on getting some national press on what's going on down here. Hopefully we can get that done. It's just a matter of somebody doing it. We've already got a guarantee that we can get it done. It's just a matter of somebody actually typing in the information and sending it to them. So we need to get that done. We're working on that. We've got a lot of things going on down here in Central Texas, folks. And the bottom line is there's been many of us that have decided that at least here in Central Texas, if America loses, if we lose America to a new world order, we're going to go down clawing, scratching, and fighting every bit of the way. So just let the people who plot such devious plans to know that we intend, at least in Central Texas, to not go down easily. Now, I want to just mention also, first off, I want to say that Thanksgiving is coming up here. And in 3 days, it will be 3 months since I lost a very special friend of mine, Pepper Davis. She was a little toy terrier that I had for 11.5 years. And I still miss her each day. Still, it's almost 3 months now, and she's still in my heart every day. And we've also, I want to tie this into to Thanksgiving, which is coming up. We have Thanksgiving coming up here on Thursday. And contrary to a lot of the Roman rituals that I attack on this program throughout the year, meaning the vernal equinox celebration, I mean Easter, and the Roman Saturnalia, I mean Christmas, in December. You know, the pagan holidays, not the pagan, but actually the Antichrist days, where everything is backwards, and Antichrist under the disguise of Christ, cultic rituals, as Easter and Christmas are. Thanksgiving, actually, the origins of Thanksgiving are actually not too bad. And the one thing that I learned in Pepper's death was that life is very short here on Earth, and that's the reason why I think it's very important to live each day as best you can. Now, we do a lot of exposing corruption and wickedness and all of this going on in our nation and abroad on this program. Nonetheless, there is a lot to be thankful for. We do have the capabilities to come down here and talk about these things, other than maybe being our food supply being very much processed and in some areas poisoned. We still do at least get abundance to eat, although I believe we don't have any voice in this government anymore. Where there's still some good things that we have in this country, and I think Thanksgiving is a day where I know my mother is here. She flew in from Ohio today, and with Tony, my stepfather, and I'm going to be enjoying Thanksgiving for the things that we do have to be thankful for here. And I think Pepper's death actually opened my eye to the how important it is to take each day at a time and to enjoy being around your loved ones and family and this type of thing. So that's what I'm going to be doing Thursday, along with reading a story in Excel, the American Statesman, that supposedly is going to do a story on some of the access producers down here, of which I was told that I may be a participant. So that will be Thursday. But the bottom line is I'm going to be enjoying the things that I have here. Even though I believe that we've lost many of our freedoms and will continue to lose many of our freedoms if more people don't stand up, we do still have a lot to be thankful for. And I think it's important to do that while the people that you love and your friends that you have are still around you. So I want to just mention that. Speaking of deaths, obituaries, I wanted to mention a fellow that used to watch our program. His name was Ricky Earl Chardon, Mr. Chardon was an employee of the COA Walnut Creek Water and Wastewater Department, but he passed away on November 20th of 1997. And we've actually had, a few dealings with him, and I want to send our condolences to his family. Can we get a close-up of this? To his family, and it was a young man here, apparently, that left us. So I want to just say, in fact, I went to Fiesta, Texas with his son one afternoon. So he passed away 4 days ago. Okay. A couple other quick tidbits. Let's go ahead and try a few calls here real quick. And then I'll get to some of the other things that I got. Well, before we do that, let me I'll get to your calls here in just about 3 minutes. I've also got some information here sent to me through fax from the Chemical Free Hydro Systems Incorporated. This is not an endorsement, this is just where it came from. And basically what it is they're telling me that Rick McLaren, Republic of Texas leader, ambassador, who I believe is a political prisoner, is still waiting the appeal trial. However, what's one thing of interest is that the Rowes, R-O-W-E-S, the family that supposedly that the Republic of Texas kidnapped, according to the paper, according to the news, the Rowes, and that was the family's name, admitted to instigating the standoff. He and a ranger, or a caver, had been planning to instigate a standoff with the Republic of Texas since February of this year. So all the information you heard about The so-called kidnapping appears now that, as usual, it wasn't as was presented. Richard McLaren is now currently in Segoville, which is a federal penitentiary. It's low security with dorm housing, and Segoville. I think it's southeast of Dallas somewhere. And one other thing that he sent me was that the Chinese now are building. This is confirmed now, apparently, that I've gotten this from several sources. The Chinese now are building missile launchers at San Diego, California. So this is all quite neighborly. Here when we talk about the invasion of our freedoms, here the Chinese apparently now are building missile launchers on our shores in San Diego, California. So with that, let's go ahead and try a few callers, and I appreciate you all holding. We'll go ahead and try a call real quick.
Hello, Jeff. How you doing tonight?
How you doing, brother?
Good, good. I was wondering if you've read Pat Robertson's book, The New World Order.
Parts of it.
I was wondering, I've never been able to find any literature besides that, and I hate to say it, but that book, I mean, it's a lot of nonsense. I mean, basically, I guess if you believe his view that the New World Order is the Antichrist and a bunch of the Freemasons, the Shriners, basically, the Illuminati, it's a bunch of individuals, occultists, Satanists, that are paving the way for the Antichrist.
Okay. What do you think it is, or do you don't believe it exists?
I'm just trying to find out as much information as I can. I've never really seen anything substantial or read anything to document that it does exist.
Well,
and when I do read something, it comes across as being real nonsense. I mean, basically, he says the Jews are the ones that are doing this.
Well, let me mention this to you. You know that Pat Robertson has, he denies even writing that book now.
I would imagine he would.
He does.
Well, he sure did make a lot of money off of it. What about his book, The New Millennium? I mean, he's in the book claiming that John Wilkes Booth was working with the New World Order. I mean, if this is a plan that the New World Order devised in 1776, boy, is it a crappy plan. I mean, it's taken, how many hundreds of years is it going to take for this plan to work? I mean, I don't see how you can have a conspiracy that goes from generation to generation to generation, unless the only key he has, it says, well, these people are working for Lucifer. They're Satanists, and they believe that they're going to rise over and rule the world. That's the only, real motivation he can say is the reason why these generation after generation after generation are doing this is so they can one day bring the Antichrist to power.
Well, let me just say this, brother. First off, I'm not going to speak about any books, because I don't need to speak about any books. But I can tell you right now that the world is not as it's being presented to you. So, no. Whether you think it's a bunch of Jews, or whether you think it's Illuminati, or whatever it is, if you think that Bill Clinton is running the world, then you shouldn't even be watching this show.
No, I don't think Bill Clinton's running.
I mean, he sits up there with his stupid speeches, and he sits there and just reads these stupid scripts. And then the media, yes, that's right. That's the whole point. These presidents that are being presented are phony. They're fraudulent.
But it seems to me if the corruption...
Let me tell you who is running it. I'll tell you who is running. I'll just go that far with it. You know who Alan Greenspan is?
Yeah, I sure did.
Okay, now you want to start looking about where the power is at in this country? Start looking there, my friend. And you don't have to get any further than that.
But you don't have to, just because Alan Greenspan's in a powerful position, but I mean to say that it's an entire hundreds of years conspiracy to form a one world government. I mean, you yourself says it bits on the seal of the dollar. That's back from 1776. How long is it going to take?
No, that's actually not correct.
Well, no, didn't.
No, that's actually not correct. 1933, that seal was put on our dollar.
But doesn't the date underneath on the seal, doesn't that say 1776?
Not that I'm aware of. It says Novus Ordo Seclorum.
Yeah, and it's got a date, and it's 1776, and that's, of course...
That's actually not correct. Let me tell you something, my friend. I have got the actual document from Adam Weishaupt, Order of the Illuminati, where he basically called through control of international finance that one day he would buy up the world through his generations, through his ancestors and descendants. What is the World Bank?
As far as what's the World Bank that we currently have?
Yeah, what do they do? Do you not think they yield a lot of power? What does the International Monetary System do?
Sure, they yield a lot of power.
Yeah, okay.
But, you know, I still, when you hold up a dollar and you say, this is a worthless piece of paper, well, I wish people would give me their worthless piece of paper. I can buy gold. If I want to put all my money in gold...
let me tell you, if you buy an ounce or more, you got to provide your Social Security number.
Well, can I diversify in silver? I mean, I can have my wealth in some type of other precious metal. I mean, to say that, yes, we've gone to a system that the money is no longer backed by silver or gold, and it's a very cumbersome system, you'd have to admit. And the amount of money we're dealing with now in a world economy, that it would be impossible to have a Fort Knox filled with gold backing our money. I mean,
I disagree with you, brother, because
we use credit cards, though, and credit cards we're working in a moneyless system basically anyway. If you wrote me a check right now, Jeff, for $1,000, it's a worthless piece of paper. But the backing behind that is what makes that important. I can take that to your bank and I can get $1,000 in cash, and if I want to go buy $1,000 worth of gold and accumulate all my money in gold, I can do that.
But you have to provide your Social Security number.
Well, but that's fine.
Okay, but so in other words, they're going to be tracking how much gold you have. Are you aware of what happened in 1933? With the War and Emergency Powers Act?
No.
Franklin Roosevelt was the president at the time, and he stated that if you had any gold at that time in 1933, that you had to turn it into the government because the gold backing was being taken off our dollar, and if you owned any gold, you were deemed as a criminal, subject to 1 year imprisonment or $10,000 in fine. Now let me ask you, what kind of a government for the people, of, for, and by the people would perform such a heinous act such as that?
I don't know, Jeff. I don't believe this government is squeaky clean. I think this government's done some bizarre stuff. I think last week it was released that during the problems with Castro, if we sent up our Mercury rocket, if it had failed, we already had an entire plan devised where we were going to blame Castro and the Cubans for interfering with it. I mean, we'd already had a plan. I'm saying this government, and you mentioned the black soldiers and the syphilis. This government has done some very bad things.
Yeah, but let me ask you something. What's your first name?
Mike.
Mike, you never answered the question. I want you to answer for me, what is the role of the International Bank of Settlements, the International Monetary Fund, the Federal Reserve Bank, and the World Bank?
As far as our Federal Reserve System is the one who's basically coining our money. The International Monetary Fund has basically been giving loans.
Okay, no, let me stop you.
Okay.
Now, who are these people, unelected people, that own stock in these corporations? Who are they to decide what nation to get in debt by loaning loans?
We could bet. You could.
No, answer the question.
No. I'm sorry.
I want you to answer the question.
The motivation.
Why would we, if we're an independent, sovereign America, why would we allow ourselves to get into a situation where international financiers are dictating not only our monetary policy but the world's? And you can scrap all of the other things with Adam Weishaupt if you don't want to believe that. If you don't want to believe that it is organized and there's a network of a conspiracy.
Well, I'm sure there's a network.
But just on the premise that we would be so sheep-like to allow people that are unelected by us, we have no control over, to make high interest rate loans to nations all over the world and get away with it.
I'm not that deep. I'm not that knowledgeable.
It doesn't take a lot of knowledge to understand the point.
Well, it would be the same thing.
These people are in control
of local bank.
These people are in control of the system.
What about our local bank that runs down? A local bank.
The local bank is not printing the nation's money.
No, but they're giving loans and making money off
Yes, but they're not. In other words, they're not buying up politicians, financing their campaigns. So the politicians that can then go and devise ways to put this country deeper into debt to the bankers. The way the country should be working, and the way it was supposed to work, was we were supposed to have a monetary system that was based from the Treasury, from the Congress, and through a sound economists. They would be printing our medium of exchange. They would be running our country, and we'd all be sovereign, independent nations. What's happened is that we've turned all of our sovereignties and all of our independence over to a clique of international criminals, and they are deciding themselves what's best for all of us. So regardless of what you say, as far as whether you believe Adam Weishaupt or Pat Robertson, doesn't really make any difference. This is blatant. This is in your face. This is going on. My only question to you is, why are you not concerned that we have turned our sovereignty, our financial system, our independence, and our ability to finance this nation and other nations over to a private group of international people who are unelected by us, who don't answer to us, who own stock in these banks, which we can't own? Why are you submitting that you think that's in the best interest of this nation?
I don't know if there's a different system or there was a different. I mean, I'm sure a lot of.
Yes, there was a different system. Do you know what it was before the Federal Reserve Act was passed in 1913?
No, what?
Okay, I'm going to tell you. For the longest time, in fact, way back when this country was founded, these people have tried to push a central bank onto this country. Way back to Andrew Jackson, who was probably the greatest president we ever had, killed the central bank of 1832. The people who are in the money printing business, not the money making business, the money printing business, know that it is the most powerful, one of the most powerful mechanisms in the history of the world to have the ability to print the money for a nation.
But I'm asking, is that strictly their motivation? Is just the one thing to make money?
No, they don't. They're not even worried about the Federal Reserve notes they're printing.
No, I'm saying as far as is this group,
their motivation is power.
But wouldn't
and
you say
control.
Wouldn't you say it's extremely? They've reached the pinnacle of power, like you're admitting?
Yes, they have.
But they're not going to stop until they've united. I mean, how could we ever? Have you ever seen how the United Nations runs? It is the most pathetic example of a governing board to ever think that they have the power.
It is
to run any.
Wait a minute. It is. UN economic sanctions have been responsible now for starving tens of thousands of Iraqis.
No, I agree. That's a catastrophe. I'm saying all in all, the governing
it's not
body,
that incompetent if it can do that.
I'm saying the governing body of the United Nations to try to attempt to try.
And
let
me tell you, the United Nations is just one arm of this. The World Trade Organization is another treasonous organization. We have now, through NAFTA and GATT, virtually given up all of our nation's trading policy over to another unelected body of criminals in the World Trade Organization.
Jeff, I tell you, I appreciate your time. I wish I know that you won't recommend any books because of the trouble.
That's right. I can't do that.
I wish there were some books. There's just some information that I could get out.
Well, Mike, let me just tell you, it's very simple. It's very simple to understand. Anytime we turn our national policy, our financial policy, our spiritual guidance, whatnot, over to use those three areas. Our financial policy, we've turned over international people who own stock in these international finance institutions. Our spiritual policy, we've turned most of that over to organizations like the World Council of Churches. Our trading policy over to the World Trade Organization. We have gone to war in this country now through UN resolutions in the Korean conflict and the Vietnam War over a UN resolution. Now, what I submit to you, Mike, is anytime we lose our sovereignty and independence and surrender them to some organization, even if it supposedly means well, that cannot be good for America. That's the bottom line. How could you perceive to think that any time we turn our independence and our policy making over to people that are unelected and unaccountable to us is good?
Well, I think Alan Greenspan is somewhat accountable.
No, he's not. Yeah, he is accountable. I mean, to the Rothschild Bank of England, he's accountable.
I'm saying the system, although I'm sure there are other alternatives, the system has been pretty good, though. I mean, don't you think the United States has prospered?
Okay, let me ask you, how do you think, what do you mean it's prospered?
Don't you think in the last 80 years that this country is now probably has one, it may be declining now, but has enjoyed probably one of the highest standards of living, has more conveniences than people can ever imagine?
Well, let me tell you some mechanisms, Mike. Now, I'm going to be sincere with you. Let me tell you some mechanisms of the conspirators. I'm going to just lay it out to you. First off, the prosperity you see is very similar to Rome and Egypt. You see these huge facilities out here, these huge structures and nice roads. Egypt had this.
But
so
they
did
lasted
Rome.
4,000 years.
Let me make my point. Let me make my point. What you're seeing out there is an illusion of prosperity financed by international bankers at the cost of the nation. Who do you think is going to pay back this $6 trillion of debt? Debt equals slavery. Our children are getting bucked all of this interest and debt to the financiers of this so-called wonderful system that you're talking about. Somebody's going to have to pay that back.
I'm not saying it's the...
So it's been financed. It's an illusion of prosperity financed by international bankers at the cost of the nation.
What country...
And it has created trillions and umpteen trillions of dollars of debt that our children can never repay. So we are debt slaves to these bankers.
Jeff,
So you can go out here and enjoy the pretty looks of all of this, but the fact is debt equals slavery. So let me counter some other things too as far as conveniences and as far as how nice and pretty they've made everything. Materialism actually is part of the conspiracy as well, because the fact is the American people are the most productive slaves of any of the slaves in the world. So the slave masters are willing to give us basic home, shelter, clothing, conveniences, as long as we continue to be slaves inside their mechanisms, their controlling mechanisms.
I'm just saying, Jeff...
No, let me you answered the question. So
Okay.
what I'm suggesting to you, Mike, is these people are fattening us up for the slaughter. And another thing that they have done, if you're familiar with Rome, you remember the old gladiator days? You know how many people are focused on entertainment and sports and Hollywood and shit of absolutely no significance.
I agree.
At the same time, they're giving up they're surrendering their identification to photo imaging cards, as you see up there on the screen now. We're submitting our children to blood and urine samples and fingerprints just to get a driver's license. We are being licensed to death. We are being feed to death. There's attack on our Second Amendment. So the point is, this debt usury money system that appears, if you don't see it, to have given us this great warm feeling that you talked about, continues to perpetrate itself on creating huge governments, creating huge bureaucracies and huge corporations, which are slowly sucking the lifeblood out of all of us, not to mention our rights and our identities and our history. And this is what's happening to us. And yes, if you want to ask me, Mike, it is a very planned, calculated conspiracy. And quite frankly, these people know how to control civilizations, and that is just exactly what they are doing.
Jeff, it seems like if our system has reached this point of being poisoned, in which we're nothing more than slaves and puppets here in the United States, is there any hope for the world? I mean, what...
Well, that's a good question, because I know for a fact that there are many people in many nations that this isn't just America's problem. There are many people that are onto this problem across the planet. And quite frankly, many of them will tell me, and other people that I've talked to that do travel across to other nations, that if America loses America is the last bastion of freedom here. I mean, we do have some rights left here. We do still have some freedoms left. But if we lose America, you can forget it. That is a very excellent point, because many of the other nations, if you study them, they're totally socialist, they're totally communist, they're slipping further and further that way, and as we are. But Americans have this problem of their history, and they're very violent people, and they like their freedom, and if they can be awoken to the fact that they're not as free as they think that they are, these people have a potential tiger by their tail, and they know it.
Jeff, brother, thank you so much for someone offering a different opinion. Hey, I'm here. I'm watching you to get educated, though, but thank you for your time.
God bless you, brother. God bless you. Okay, let's go ahead and go to this. Let's go ahead and try these other calls we've been holding for a while. Just real quick, folks. We're running. I'm running out of time here already. Let's go to another quick caller here. Hello.
Hey, Jeff.
How you doing, brother?
I'm doing fine. I'm glad y'all finally got to that point there, because that's basically where we're at. The country's got to, I think we're already behind, actually, in regards to where our situation is at.
Oh, yeah. There's no doubt about it.
You know, and when you really debate about the things like you just went on for quite a while there, I was holding that really, you know, those are the things where we need to be moving on now. I just wanted to mention, which I didn't hear much on previously, was the Ted Turner's donation to the United Nations. That really made my jaw drop, and I was wondering if you had any ideas on it.
It's kind of small time, really, when you consider the big picture. You know, I don't think eventually, somehow it's going to come out of the people's pockets, I would say, anyway. So, I think it's just one of those loving little warm, fuzzy stories to get everybody thinking that the UN is such a great organization, peace organization. And that's kind of what I think of something like that. It's a kind of a conditioning type story.
Well, for the people that would probably wipe 3/4 of the planet off, you know, and laugh at, you know, not laugh, but actually want it to be that way because, you know, of all the reasons, you know, you've talked about before, you know, it goes on. I'm just saying it's indicative kind of an agenda, I think, that's being set.
I think it's part of the conditioning. If you want to know my opinion, I think it's just one of those little feel-good issues. But it's very well documented that the United Nations and all of these so-called world organizations are you know, it's very well documented that they are, you know, they're pretty well wicked, and that's all there is to it. So anybody that studies it knows it.
Well, you look at Ted Turner and his position in society, and you know he's kind of a hard hitter, though. You know, you got to look at what he can do as far as cable. I mean, public access here and things like that, and just $1 billion isn't. I think that, you know, the money figure doesn't matter. It's just the way it's all coming together and being connected into society, you know. And it's really, like I said, we got to play catch up, and you're definitely one of the people who are helping to do it. So I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate it, bro. You know, I was just talking to my my stepfather on the way down here, and he was telling me that you know, you're fighting against people with unbelievable power. Mm-hmm. And in other words, he's suggesting that maybe we ought to just forget the whole thing and
be sheep. Well, I wouldn't say that. That'd be dumb.
Well, that's kind of what he's suggesting, and you know, I don't know what the outcome of it, and I guess that's what takes more courage. It takes more courage actually to stand up on a side that appears that you might lose.
Yeah, well, everybody can label you as an idiot and everything, and you get so many callers that just don't even understand how real it really is, and, you know, it's just, you know, it's hard to deal with. I know you probably have problems dealing with it because you know how true it is, and other people...
No, I don't have problems with it. What's your first name?
Josh.
Josh, I don't have problems with it.
Well, not in that way. You know, it's just the furniture gets in the way, you know, of you
No, I don't worry about that.
Yeah, well,
I just press on with my little show down here. We're doing some shortwave. We're doing some radio. We're doing a lot of different things. And frankly, I'm just having fun with it. And I just kind of let the chips fall where they may, Josh. That's about all you can do, man. Just educate the people that will listen and press on, man.
Yeah, well, that's what.
And if we lose, we lose. You know, if we lose, we lose.
Yeah, well, I don't want to lose.
Yeah.
All right.
God bless you, man. Another quick caller before we go to the video. Hello.
Hello, Jeff.
How you doing, sir?
Good. This is Recon Robert.
What's going on, brother?
What has happened to your hair?
What's happened to it?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I cut it.
No.
You talking about my tail? Yeah, I cut my tail.
Hey, you do real good under fire. Love to hear that. That conversation with Mike. I'd like to hear more like that. People are really starting to tune in. I believe that.
Well, let me tell you something. I have studied this thing for so long that I will challenge anybody to call up here and debate me.
Oh,
anybody can call up here and debate me, and I guarantee you that they're going to lose. It's not because I'm better than them. It's not because I have an intellect of 210 IQ.
Truth stands.
It's because I have the truth on my side, and that's all there is to it, man.
And truth stands by itself.
It cuts through all the millions of lies of the world we're being fed on a daily basis.
Right, and we're about to see another truth come forward. If you watched the evening news and saw the Japanese gentleman bawling on television as his financial system went defunct, and then Babylon's great president, Hillary Clinton, has started movements to bail these people out who are causing the stock markets of Asia to crumble a little bit, Koreans, Taiwanese, etc., etc. That's unacceptable. That's my money. It's unacceptable.
Did you hear anything about this? I just got this confirmed about the Chinese building missile launchers at San Diego. Have you heard that?
Oh, yes.
What about the Clinton agrees to Soviet request to pull our submarines from the polar ice caps? You heard anything about that?
Unacceptable.
Yeah. See, it's just treason going on everywhere, man, and they're throwing it right in your face, and the people are just, let's go to the Cowboys game, man.
Why not?
That's what it's. I mean,
well,
it's just,
I don't know. Can you still drink beer in the stadium?
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing what's going. But look, just keep your chin up, man. That's what I do. Just keep focused and keep getting the word out when you can, and live a good life,
well,
man.
They punished me back in '65 in the Nam, so I'm pretty tough right now. And if anybody would just like to examine, just take it, open up your Bible to the book of Revelation, look at chapter 18, and just look at it in the national sense. Don't try to put any religion to it. Just look at it for face value. You will know who Babylon the Great is.
Hey, yeah, you talking about the Pope? Or
No,
you got a different.
I'm not looking at it in a religious sense.
Yeah, you're looking at it just the whole world scheme.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Look at this recon, Robert. This is today's mail.
Wonderful.
So, well, yeah, most of it, yeah, this is what came today. And in fact, my producer's got a whole bunch more, and there's some that they left a little card saying that they didn't have room to fit it all in.
Well, listen, there
are people waking up to this.
Yes, there are. There's a lot of people out there who understand what you're doing, and Alex and people like that, but they're afraid to call or voice their opinion. Please, please get on the bandwagon. You can't be hurt.
Time is short. Let me tell you, brother.
Yes, sir.
Tyrants are laboring endlessly right now as we speak. And
they have nothing better to do.
The people are going to have to decide real soon, real quickly, if this is still the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Yes, sir. You all inspire me.
God bless you,
Thank you. You keep working at it.
Thank you, brother. God
Good
bless
night.
you. Let's go to this quick, we got a quick thing here, and then we're going to do a couple other quick things. We can only go about 5 minutes.
I love Mike Hanson Archives. You ready to run?
You say you go across the river and the Mexican soldiers never shoot nobody, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, I've been going across the river, and I have been stopped by the Mexican soldiers, they never do nothing like that,
They ain't shot nobody, have they?
They really treat the people real good,
Yeah. That figures. Maybe we need to send our soldiers to school with them.
Probably that's why they need to go to school in Mexico or something so I will learn something.
Maybe so, huh? How have you been, Francisco? Okay?
Fine.
And Mama and Papa okay?
Yeah, we're trying to go just fine.
And we're all still staying busy and nobody forget.
Yeah.
We're all going to keep working.
Yeah.
And hope our soldiers don't shoot nobody else.
I hope that.
Especially not me or you, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, Francisco. We don't want to keep you from work too long.
Okay.
Here's your new world order, folks. This is what it leads to.
Yeah. It is.
This is what it leads to. I guess De La Muertes is not very long ago. And he has plenty of... And we didn't bring one. At least he is with all his friends. And his family's friends from generations. Still, New World Order. All within sight. There's where he died.
Yeah.
There's the church the funeral was at. forever. Thanks to you know who. Oh, went inside, he got shot. There's funeral in the church. Yeah, let's see. We can't quite see the house from here. It's right behind the trees. People buried here for generations. Look at, and he is just one of the latest. Ezekiel Hernandez Jr. And the Border Patrol's giving us promise.
The New Federalist, and I thought this was really interesting. Diana's death, are French covering for murder incorporated. October 7th, there is mounting evidence that the French authorities are willfully covering up high-level political assassination by the same international murder incorporated apparatus that killed President John F. Kennedy and failed in repeated efforts to murder French President Charles de Gaulle. Increasingly, new eyewitness accounts and forensic tests are ruling out the possibility that the August 31st, 1997 Paris car crash that claimed the lives of Princess Diana, Dodi Al-Fayed, and Henri Paul was an accident or was principally the result of drunk driving. Yet the more that such evidence comes to light, the more aggressively French police are trying to cover up the crime. On September 30th, investigative magistrate Hervé Stephan conducted a carefully staged-managed reenactment of the crash in the Alma Tunnel, and the wreckage of the Mercedes 280S in which the Princess of Wales perished was hauled into the tunnel. Over 100 reporters, each of whom had been individually called and leaked the time of the reenactment, showed up. French police officials reportedly passed the word around to the assembled reporters that new evidence showed that driver Henri Paul had been on a week-long drinking binge before the crash, which is a provable lie, and that the paparazzi photographers were innocent of any involvement. One day later, however, the French police were forced to admit that paint from the still missing Fiat Uno, which several credible eyewitnesses had seen fleeing the scene of the crash, was found on the right side of the Mercedes, proving that at least one other car had been involved in the crash. And on October 6, NBC TV News magazine Dateline aired an interview with a French doctor who was one of the eyewitnesses and the more credible eyewitnesses, and one of the first people to arrive at the scene of the crash. He said he saw the Fiat Uno parked at the exit of the tunnel for several seconds before speeding off, and other witnesses have said that a second car and as many as 2 motorcycles were engaged in an attack on the Mercedes seconds before the crash. Now, this is what's really, I found extremely interesting. Mysterious flash of light. Several witnesses also told the press and the French authorities that they saw a very powerful flash of light inside the tunnel just a few seconds before the crash. While initially the French police tried to dismiss this as a possible flash from a camera, another possible explanation has been offered for the light flash, and a leading expert on international terrorism and irregular warfare points out that there are now a number of commercially sold powerful mini lasers that would be the ideal weapon for blinding and disorienting the Mercedes driver, and that would secure a sure kill crash. Such lasers not only deliver a directed beam of blinding light, but also cause a terrific surge of pain in the optic nerve. In this week's issue of Executive Intelligence Review, science writer Charles Stevens publishes a description of this technology based on reports by the International Committee of the Red Cross, which has been leading a campaign to ban the use of such anti-personnel lasers for several years. And the possibility that a laser was used in the Diana murder on the basis of an in-depth review of the strategic setting of the princess's death. At the time of the crash, the Princess of Wales had reopened her several years-long public assault on the House of Windsor, an assault that had helped fuel a still-raging battle over the fate of the British monarchy. Ever since her November 1995 interview with BBC Panorama, in which she first stated that her estranged husband, Prince Charles, was unfit to be the King of England, and she had been the target of death threats ever since.
We're actually running out of time here. Look, could you kind of summarize what you think this is?
Well,
what you're saying?
The tunnel under the Seine River where the crash occurred was the ideal location to carry out an attack and obtain a sure kill, provided that you had the proper personnel and weaponry. And so far, eyewitness evidence that has filtered through the French cover-up effort, including the indications of this sophisticated blinding weapons, conforms to that scenario. And one other thing that's really suspect is the involvement of the French authorities in league with their British counterparts in this flagrant cover-up of the crime. That's some of the strongest evidence so far that there is a much bigger story here. And the story goes on to talk about French President Chirac in the early months of his presidency was threatened by elimination by the British monarchy, and he caved into those threats, and ever since has been in a de facto alliance with London and with other British asset networks inside France, principally associated with the late French socialist figure and late French President Francois Mitterrand. The threat to Chirac was delivered, this is interesting, delivered by a sub-agency of Prince Philip's World Wildlife Fund, and specifically referred to the early 1960s string of assassination attempts against President Charles de Gaulle by a British intelligence front organization, Permindex. The same Permindex organization which is alleged to have succeeded in assassinating President Kennedy. The emerging evidence of a parallel between the 1960s unleashing of Permindex, and the recent death of Princess Diana underscores the importance of busting up this ongoing French cover-up. And I remember after this happened, someone mentioned to me that wasn't it interesting that she had just recently gotten her divorce, and her mother-in-law was a primary figure in the Illuminati. So, you know, having been on the inside, she would be quite a danger to the British monarchy to be coming out with
well, it's possible.
Her attack.
I really don't know that much. That was an interesting
I thought this is an interesting story because I think that there's a lot more than meets the eye to that.
Oh, yeah, I agree. Well, just have a seat here. We'll put up a slate real quick. Was the other guest still here? All right, bring him on in. Put up a slate real quick. Here we are for the last 8 minutes. Familiar face, ACTV, Alex Jones.
Hey,
Alex,
how you doing?
Good to see you here, buddy. I plugged your show today earlier.
Oh, thank you.
I did. Okay, Alex, what's on your mind today, brother?
Oh, I already got a show later tonight, so I figured if you're going on, I might want to to pop on and talk to you for a couple minutes at the end of your show. I heard that some of that argument you were having with that one gentleman earlier.
Yeah, that's my stepfather.
Oh, I'm not talking about him. I mean the one guy on the telephone.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Talk to Mike. He's a pretty smart fella. It's just that it's so hard to admit that we're under this much control. Something you were talking about, he was saying, well, what about the World Bank? What's their power? If he just calls one of the major banks, they're under World Bank control guidelines. Say if you put in a large check, $20,000, and it could be 2 weeks later, and you come to get a small percentage of it out, they'll say, we're sorry, we can't give you but 2 to 10%, depending on what the bank officer wants at each time. You're like, but it's my money. It cleared. Here's my driver's license, my thumbprint, and everything else that doesn't matter. Now, they say that's for fraud and things, but you notice they never go after the fraudulent people. What it's about is so the World Bank and the banks under its control can use your money.
Okay, now let me turn it around, because this is the question I think that needs answered, Dan. When we were talking out here to my stepfather, nice guy, I like him, but it's like he was saying, you know, when you compare some of the material things that we have now and they had 100 years ago, I have an answer for that for him. What is your answer when the average person say, "Oh, come on, man, we have more material things now than we did 100 years ago"?
Well, that's because of the means of production, because of the advances of science and
technology
and the wonderful patent system that we used to have in this country. I say used to because that's been undermined by the World Trade Organization. They don't want you to be able to get a patent, or you can get an international patent, which elapses in just a couple of years. Basically, it comes down to this, and it's like you said earlier: we do not have any level of truthfulness in our mainstream media, in our universities, and most importantly, our federal government. And it's the way Americans accept basic lying. I don't care if milk and honey was running down the streets. If it's all based in lies and fraud and corruption, it's bad. And milk and honey is not running down the streets. They're telling us it is, but Americans are working more jobs.
Yeah.
And longer than they've ever had. There's more service industry than there's ever been before. There's less production. And the important point that's a fact, of the last 20 years in the world, you've had more consolidation of wealth than in any other time in modern history in the last 200 years. That means you've had more billionaires and more trillion-dollar corporations that have, and interlocking corporations.
And you've also had more people dependent upon government.
Well, the important part...
Like, they're sitting over there dependent upon Social Security.
Well, yes, but the important...
You got welfare, so...
The important point is this. The more transfer and control goes to centralized governments, then the more international, the scope of this new international government gets bigger to control those levers of control of each country. And people really believe, some people believe, that government's there to help them. And the bigger the government gets, the more criminal transfer of wealth there is to these ultra-rich who seek to destroy the middle class, the new rich, the new money groups, because they don't want anybody to grow up to oppose them.
Let me just say this, though, folks.
Big government equals corrupt, tyrannical systems.
Let me just summarize how I feel about it. I would say that, yes, materialism has been a factor in all of this.
Beautiful shadows, I mean, not.
Materialism is part of it. They will allow you certain materialism things to be as long as we're productive slaves. However, one thing from now but 100 years ago we didn't have. We didn't have the attack on the Second Amendment. We didn't have the First Amendment.
Hate speech.
We didn't have the IRS threats with lawsuits and audits. We didn't have our house seized by property taxes. We didn't have all these phony wars overseas that we've had over the last 100 years. We are losing our rights. The Constitution was actually suspended in 1933, so the Bill of Rights is virtually mute. The Constitution's mute. So they are allowing us some materialistic things. At the same time, Alex, they're taking our rights, our identities, and our history away from us.
That they are doing, Jeff.
That to me is the answer to that.
And then you've got diversions like this. People ask what the power of the UN is. They're only an arm of corrupt interests worldwide. And in Japan this month, they're going to try to restrict our fossil fuel consumption up to 20%, when no one else has to make any cuts of any significance, but we have to make all the cuts. In 3 months, they're going to have a meeting in Germany where they're going to try to restrict guns worldwide. The United Nations has taken over our national parks. They put up signs at many of them in our heritage sites. I mean, this is going on at a breakneck speed. They have incredible power. There is no accountability. We can't go to them with grievances.
Yeah.
So basically, the Constitution is an incredibly deep trouble. It's pretty much gone. We need to go ahead and admit that it's gone and start fighting to rebuild it and reinstate it.
The constitutional republic.
I just want to say that I'm going to be on tonight from 11 to 10:30 live.
11 to 12:30.
Oh, yeah, excuse me. Yeah, I'm losing my mind.
On channel, what time? How much time we got left?
A couple minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, excuse me, 11 to 12:30.
11 on channel?
Yeah, time doesn't go backwards.
On channel?
I believe it's, I've been on it a lot. It's a Bad Bob Presents show. I believe it's channel 16. I may not be right.
Okay, and what's your regular show tomorrow?
It's from 8:30. That's 8:30 to till 11. And,
on channel 10.
On channel 10.
And of course, Alex hosts a radio show here in town. And Alex, you're doing some good work.
Yeah,
brother.
like the people out there, I kind of just wandered in here just to sit in on your show.
You're also going to be one of the people that's supposedly going to be in this news story coming up.
Yeah,
on Thursday.
The story will be, wild puppet fights, psychedelic sex shows, and then you got these weirdos over here.
Well, we don't know that to be true.
Thursday's episode.
Yeah, we don't know that to be the case, but that could be the case.
Yeah.
Alex Jones, final comments as we wrap up this November 24th edition of the Jeff Davis
Well,
Show.
Jeff, I want to thanks for letting me come on for a couple minutes and kind of talk about things. You know, you got, again, this Time magazine, the showdown. Boy, I'm really off tonight. And it's really a big joke. We created Saddam Hussein. We gave him all the weapons of mass destruction, and now we're calling him a criminal. Yes, he is a criminal, just like the people.
It's the same thing. Yeah, we're running out of time here. But it's the same thing. They created the wars and the enemies, and now they're going to send our young people to fight it.
And guys, the establishment laughs at you behind your back. You have no reason to continually think that you're part of this system. You are nothing but slaves at the lower room.
Folks, we will back. Put up the deal here. You forgot the deal. The black deal. You forgot the deal.
It's all right. Take care, guys.
God bless.